Alrighty, technical difficulties be damned. We are live on the Cover One Roundup. Right now, just me. David is dealing with some minor technical difficulties, and he shall be here shortly so that we can talk about the 6-2 Buffalo Bills and their dominating victory over the Seattle Seahawks. Damn good game, and there's some other things we can get into too, especially the AFC East, a certain team down in Baltimore losing a game. I'm going to start somewhere, and we'll see when David gets here where he wants to go. The Joshua, apparently, Uche trade from the Patriots to the Chiefs. The Chiefs loading up essentially yet again in order to make a run at a third straight Super Bowl, have now added Uche and DeAndre Hopkins to the fold. I don't particularly know the necessary reason for it. They did move a 6th-round pick in 2026 to get him. They seemingly are still a very, very good defense. Their issues are on the offensive side of the ball. They just keep winning one-score games. They're somehow 7-0. It pisses me off to no end that team is still so good, yet they play so bad, and they're probably going to finish the season 15-2 and be the 1 seed. Probably enough on the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going to hop into something else and topic that's a lot more fun. The AFC East is all but done. It's all but locked up. The Bills at 6-2, the Jets at 2-5, the Patriots at 2-6, and the Jets in last place at 2-6. It fills me with joy. I love it. It makes me so happy that essentially on Sunday, if the Bills beat the Dolphins, we're pretty much destined to win the AFC East if we're not already destined to win the AFC East, which is pretty incredible considering the fact that the Bills were not the odds-on favorite to win the division heading into the season. The New York Jets were actually the odds-on favorite heading into the season. So Buffalo now out to probably its biggest lead in the division, I think, in the Sean McDermott era. Maybe their biggest lead since the 90s in the division. Still not wrapped up. I think you will... I just got a chuckle from Brittany, whose podcast I'll be on later this week. Dolphins winning book market. Hey, they very well could win. I've seen crazier things happen. I've seen the Bills lose to the Jaguars when Urban Meyer was their coach. So it would not shock me if somehow the Dolphins managed to win an ugly game in Buffalo. That being said, right now, the Bills clearly control their own destiny, clearly control that division, and they're well on their way for a 5th straight AFC East title, which is something that a 10-year-old me would have never thought he'd possibly ever say in his entire life. Moving on from the AFC East, as I just try to knock out these news and notes before David gets online, the Ravens lost to the 1-6 Cleveland Browns in Jameis Winston's debut for that team. The Baltimore Ravens, who essentially were deemed the best team in the NFL, now no longer even lead their own division. They are in 2nd place, and if the Steelers win tonight, they will remain in 2nd place. So Baltimore, big bad Baltimore, might be a wild card team. And actually right now, as it stands, the Bills would play the Ravens in the 1st round of the playoffs. David, welcome back, buddy.
I hope Comcast burns and dies. Anyway, so what were you talking about?
I knocked out a little bit of the Uche trade, then okay. AFC East, and then talked about the Ravens briefly.
Did you know that his name is Uche, not Uche?
Oh, it's Uche, and it's Joshua.
It is I saw that as well. It's Joshua Uche, not Josh Uche, which I don't like either of those changes, if we're being honest, but
yeah. No, I'm not gonna abide by that.
That's fair. Man, just a
opinions on the AFC East. Give me the opinions on the AFC East.
It sucks. Like other than the Bills, it's just, this is an awful, terrible division. Like all of these teams have 2 wins except for the Bills, who have 6 wins. The Jets have gone all in for absolutely nothing. They were better last year when they had Zach Wilson at quarterback, which is an astonishing thing to say. The Dolphins, man, like they definitely looked better. I'll give them that.
Mm-hmm.
Looked better with Tua in the lineup, which, I think most people would probably assume would be the case. Still couldn't win that game, though. And you're at home, and you had your quarterback. And, okay, Whatever. The Patriots, God bless them, they got 2 wins, and one of them's over the Jets, and they continue to own the Jets. It's just hysterical.
Dude, the thing that gets me, and I'm as guilty as anybody. I'm just pulling up the preview I wrote for SI on the Jets. I predicted them to go 10-7, and I had a floor of 6-11. So I was wrong, and that's all predicated on like if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, they're definitely going to hit that prediction. They're a disaster. Like people keep bringing up that dream team of the Eagles, which I think was 2011. This is worse. This is so much worse. Like the talent that they have is absurd, and yet they seemingly can't do anything right. As I think David froze again. Yeah, so the Jets, who on paper, to me at least, they're an absolutely elite team. Their offensive line is good on paper, clearly not good on the field. Aaron Rodgers, I never thought was going to be great this season, but I figured maybe you get 2022 Aaron Rodgers before he came to the Jets in 2023. He's been worse than that. Breece Hall's taken a step backwards. That defense is significantly worse, including like Sauce Gardner is not the corner I think a lot of the NFL thought he was. He's still very, very good, still close to that all-pro level as a player, but he's just seemingly not a good. He's not playing well this year. And the strategy against the Jets right now is run at Sauce Gardner because he does not want to tackle. So you just run at him over and over and over again, and you're going to pick up yards. That team is an unmitigated disaster, and they're to a point where they need to sell. Like they need to sell. Their team, they don't have a lot of draft picks in the future. They're going to have some dead cap coming up. They don't really have starters at many positions in the future either. They need to sell players and try to get some draft capital to prep for a new rebuild in the future. But they will never, ever, ever sell. Joe Douglas knows that the writing's on the wall. He does not have a future with the Jets, so his time there's about done. But he's not going to sell the team here in the middle of a season that basically will determine his job. So the Jets, a disaster. The Dolphins are a whole different story. It's just really weird. The injury to Tua played a major role in what their record is right now. But even before that injury, they almost didn't beat the Jaguars. They honestly shouldn't have beaten the Jaguars. And then the Bills absolutely destroyed them, which was to be expected. And then obviously they go through the spell without Tua, and now Tua comes back, and their offense actually works, but their defense doesn't, and they lose by 1 score to a Cardinals team, which many consider not a very good football team. I actually still think they're a solid football team, and one the Bills beat in week 1. But now at 2-5, if you go into Buffalo and you don't win that game, you fall to 2-6. The Bills go up to 7-2. Like there's no team in that division that can catch the Bills. So big game for Buffalo on Sunday. Like David said, this division's an absolute disaster outside of Buffalo. I don't know the earliest the teams ever clinched their division, but it's tracking towards a Thanksgiving clinch for Buffalo, which would be absolutely astonishing. All right. Trying to think what else to cover. I had another topic I was interested in David's opinion on. He'll be back at some point, I do believe. The Detroit Lions, my personal opinion, best team in football. Although they have some really weird stat lines consistently. Jared Goff yesterday, and I don't have the stats up right now, I think he was something like 13 for 15 for 87 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they won by 1 billion points. Like that team doesn't even make any sense. They can run the ball, they can throw the ball. Not that I think Jared Goff's the best quarterback in the world, and their defense can still ball out when they need to, despite not having Aiden Hutchinson. I do expect them to make a trade for somebody, though. I don't know who that somebody is, but they know that they have a legit shot at a Super Bowl this season, and they need an edge rusher to make that all work. So Detroit Lions, my number 1 team in football. And then the last thing, just closing out some news and notes. The team that I'm keeping an eye on for the remainder of the season, and actually was keeping an eye on heading into this game or into this weekend, and was let down by them pretty significantly, was the Cincinnati Bengals. Like they're 3-5. David, I want
Keep
your
talking
opinion
about the
on
Bengals. We'll see if I can get through a rant of the Bengals by the time my internet cuts out again.
I do think you'd have a very good opinion on them too, seeing as though I'm sure you watched that entire game. I
watched that Bengals game. That
Okay.
was here's the thing. The Bengals defense sucked, which we knew coming into this game. They continue to suck against the Eagles. The Bengals started the game on a 10-minute touchdown drive where they converted 5 third downs. That was easily the best part of their whole game, and they still can't run the ball. They continue to work almost exclusively out of shotgun. They continue to rely entirely on Joe Burrow reading defenses and knowing better than everyone else, and Jamar Chase being incredible. And it doesn't really matter if T. Higgins is out. They're just like, hey, we'll just plug someone else in there and it'll work, right? Well, we drafted Jermaine Burton. He should be good to go. And like Jermaine Burton made like a catch that was good. That was kind of it. I mean, this is a broken operation. They should be selling at the deadline, quite frankly, and they're never going to, because Mike Brown is never going to commit to an actual rebuild for as long as Joe Burrow is his quarterback. And it's pretty pathetic that this team is where they are, because had they won that game, they would be 4-4. They would be ahead of where the Browns are right now. They would be, competing with the Steelers, and they would be pretty comfortably like in that wild card mix. And instead they're 3-5 and back to bottom feeding.
Yeah. The thing that gets me with like Joe Burrow has been very good this year too. Like legitimately, I've even seen some Bengals fans suggest he should be in the MVP conversation, but because of the way that the NFL votes on MVP, there's a 0% chance he can be in that conversation, nor can he win it. I still look at them and I'm like, they're going to make the playoffs, which I didn't think I'd say this season, because I think I predicted them to miss the playoffs and finish third in that division. But when you look at the AFC, like, all right, wild card teams, one of Pittsburgh and Baltimore, probably Pittsburgh is going to be a wild card team. Then Denver, the Chargers, like one or two of those teams. Indy, Anthony Richardson is an unmitigated disaster when throwing the football. Like, the Bengals could still go on a run here and sneak into the playoffs, and I think they would be a tricky out. That defense is terrible, but like Joe Burrow, in a similar vein of like Josh Allen, like he can go win you a game. And I'm a little concerned. I was trying to pull up their schedule to actually see what they have coming up. It's actually not that hard of a schedule. They have the Raiders next week. They should win that game. Then they go play Baltimore again, a team they almost beat. Then they play the Chargers, I don't know. I could see them getting in at 9-8. I think if they get in at 9-8, that's going to be annoying.
I mean, the thing with that's going in their favor is the fact that the rest of the conference just sort of sucks outside of the division leaders. Like it's the Bills, the Ravens, the Texans, and the Chiefs essentially that are the worthwhile opponents in this whole conference. And basically everyone else you rattled off there, I mean, they're not that good. Like, unless even if the Browns went on some sort of streak, right? Like with Jameis, the preacher, by the way. I don't know if you heard anything that he said pregame. He was just quoting Bible verses to the sideline reporter before the game.
Oh my God.
If he is not preaching at a Seventh-day Adventist church in his hometown after he retires, I have no idea what else he would do with his life. I cannot imagine that man doing anything else with his life other than maybe coaching football. Even then, regardless though, like even if the Browns went on a streak, and I think their defense is still good, right? Like unless they decide, I mean, they already tried selling off by giving the Bills Amari Cooper, and maybe they continue that by getting rid of Za'Darius.
As David freezes again, like, yeah, I mean, they have players that could get rid of. Even the rumors swirling about Myles Garrett, which would be a massive blockbuster trade and one that would require multiple first round picks, but he's a game changing player, season changing player. He's a guy, for instance, and not that I expect this to happen, if Buffalo traded for him, my expectations coming into the season is that the Bills would make the playoffs and they would have a shot at winning a playoff game. That was my goal. If the Bills were to trade for somebody like Myles Garrett, I would instantly say that the Bills are winning the Super Bowl. I don't think that they have enough pieces right now to do that, simply because the defensive line has been so inconsistent, especially their issues against the run. I don't know how they beat a team like Baltimore that can beat you through the air and on the ground in the ways they can do that. You would need a freakish player like a Myles Garrett, or please bring Matt Milano back at a minimum. But yeah, the Browns selling off will be interesting to see what they do after this win against the Ravens. Because maybe now the Browns think, hey, wait a second, maybe we can actually win some football games with a real quarterback.
Maybe. Maybe this is just one of those weird in-division games that the Browns just happened to steal from the Ravens, which I'm more than happy for, by the way. I'm totally happy to see the Ravens win streak end after they started 0-2 and then ripped off 5 in a row. It's nice to see them lose again. But it's like the Browns are so tricky because it's so clear that this could be such a better team, that this could be a team with a far, far better record than they currently have. But they just stuck with the worst possible situation. Like they chose to be in the worst possible situation at quarterback. And it's astounding that they did that and continued to do that. So it is what it is, but it may just be a case where they've dug themselves a hole too deep to get themselves out of it at this point.
This weekend, they play the Chargers on November 3rd, and the trade line's November 5th. I think that game probably will decide if they sell or not. If they can beat the Chargers, then you have that head-to-head win over against another possible wildcard team. They have their bye week the following week. So if you do win, you might say to yourself, hey, we could probably go on a run and maybe sneak in as a wild card. If you lose, you sell, and then you go in the bye week and, I don't know, reset. Maybe you see a little bit more of Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But I think the world wants to see Jameis Winston.
I mean, the world has always wanted to see Jameis Winston, even when he was throwing, like maybe even especially when he was in Tampa, when Bruce Arians was there and he threw 30 touchdowns and 30 picks. I mean, that was a show every single week. Single week. Our wonderful, lovely boss, Gregory Thompson, between David shirt and Uber's hat, the screen is going to melt. I agree. And I'm going to melt if I have more issues with Xfinity. Because I'm just going to burn them to the ground. That's a joke. For legal reasons, I'm going to say that's a joke. And yeah, I mean, it is a great shirt. Let's be real here. It's a great shirt and a great hat. It is kind of a killer combo between the two of us. So, all right, that's it for news and notes for us. Before we get any
one more.
Go ahead, please.
The Hail Mary was jaw dropping.
That was awesome. Listen, I hate Washington just on principle as an Eagles fan. I could not help but celebrate that. That was amazing.
And I forgot the guy. Was it Tyreek Stevenson? And do I have the name right? The DB that was like trying to pump up fans during the middle of the play, and you can see the Bears fans pointing like, buddy, the play's happening. That is one of the more embarrassing single moments I've seen a player have in NFL history. It was incredible.
So I actually interviewed Tyreek Stevenson when he was at the Senior Bowl a few years ago. He gave some good answers, and I appreciate that, but you definitely got a certain attitude and mentality from him of just like there's a not that he's like bad or anything. I'm not gonna try to proclaim or judge his personal life or anything like that, because that's not what it's about. We're talking about football. But you could just tell his personality is a little bit odd, and that seemed to shine through in that particular moment. That is just a brutal way to lose a game. I mean, losing a game on a Hail Mary is one thing. Losing a game on a Hail Mary, and then 30 minutes later, you have somebody on Twitter saying, wow, look at this angle. And you see this guy jawing with Commanders fans because he thinks the game is just clearly over. And then the play starts. He's still talking to him. Yeah, and you've got Bears. You see like Bears fans pointing like, hey, the play's going on. Turn around. And then even when he turns around, he's still like, whatever, And then he's so out of position because he should be trailing Noah Brown, who's the one who rebounded it in the back of the end zone, which is what the design is supposed to do. You're at least what they're trying to do, right? Tip it up and see if somebody behind you can get it. And Tyreek Stevenson is like screaming across. Oh, like he's so far away from the pile, he comes all the way back in to then tip it up. Instead, everyone else, you look at the everyone else in that, or at least the Bears fans, they're like looking and trying to like knock it down, or at least it looks that way. But just brutal. There's no other way of putting that. That's a brutal way to lose a game. And to be fair, the Bears played a terrible game, and the Commanders also played a terrible game. But like, that's just bad.
He's having like a damn good year too. Outside, he was NFC Defensive Player of the Week in Week 1. He has a sub 80 passer rating against. I'm just like looking through. Yesterday he had 9 tackles and a pass defended, which is a solid game for DB. 9 tackles, a lot. And then to have that be, he'll be remembered for that moment for the rest of his life, unless he has some crazy, like a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. Like that's the moment for him now.
It's sort of like when Marcus Williams accidentally took out the Saints defensive back on the Minneapolis Miracle. That's Stephon Diggs. Yeah. Like Marcus Williams had a great rookie year that year, like a phenomenal rookie year at safety for them. It was like a main reason why the Saints were in the playoffs and like were playing as well as they were. But people just sort of remembered that play, and Marcus Williams continued to have a really good career and got a big ass contract from Baltimore. I don't know if he's really done anything with Baltimore since then because of injuries, but that's neither here nor there. Sometimes you just get remembered for that one play, good or bad, right? I think I still maintain that Malcolm Butler made an entire career off of that interception at the goal line in the Super Bowl. Because he was not a good cornerback. I will die on that hill. Malcolm Butler was not a good cornerback. That's stupid. Anyway, that's stupid play. All right, let's move on to why we're all here, which is to talk about the Bills winning their 3rd straight game and doing it in pretty easy, controlling fashion as well. They got off to a fast start, which is what we've all been wanting them to do. Some of that was the result of the Seahawks simply making so many boneheaded mistakes early on. But the defense did force 2 3-and-outs to start the game, which was such a welcome sign given how poorly, I mean, we talked about this last week, but the defense just does not start very well. And for them to go and do that right off the bat, even if the Seahawks were missing DK Metcalf, was a very, very impressive start for them. It was very cool and good to see at that point.
And we talked last week about like the slow starts for the Bills, and this one was relatively fast. The thing that really hit home to me, and I think we've also talked about this on other shows too, is like there's very few stress-free Bills games. Most of them are chock full of stress, and you're just waiting for, the ball to burst and like what's going to go wrong because something's inevitably going to go wrong. It did feel like at some point midway through the second quarter, it was like, oh, this is one of those games where that's not going to be a problem. Like they are just going to run away with this one, even though at halftime, they were only up 14-3. That being said, it seemed like the most insurmountable 14-3 that I can remember in recent, like it felt easier than the Jaguars game for some reason, at least to me. I don't know why, because the Jaguars game was absolute destruction, but something about this one in particular was like, there's no way for Seattle to come back. They have nothing. There's nothing they can do to really challenge the Bills for the remainder of this game.
Yeah, it was. They just struggled. So the ball snapping directly over your head.
That's bad.
Yes, you have control over that, but it's hard to over, especially on what was that? That was 2nd and goal, right? That happened.
Yeah, because they threw a pass after that. Yeah.
So it was tough to just go through that in that sense, but then you also get into 4th and goal, and I was pretty confident they were going to score on 4th and goal when they went for it. maybe they do, maybe they don't. But part of the reason why they didn't score, I mean, obviously Geno just tripped coming out from under center. But part of the reason he tripped is because the Bills got good penetration up front, and the pulling guard and the center just get all their feet all tangled up, which I'll be honest, I don't like pulling guards on 4th and short or like any sort of short yardage play, especially in goal line situations. I feel like you're asking for trouble to be invited in at that point. I've never loved that particular idea when it comes to offensive play calling. And again, outside of that, it's not like the Seahawks had no other opportunities. Like, coming into this game, I was very concerned about how the Bills would defend against Kenneth Walker, right? Because he's so fast and slippery and creative, and he did nothing in that game. He really didn't. I mean, it was very, and from the get-go, the Bills clearly made an effort. I mean, they made great tackles against him. They didn't let him get outside of them. They were just really good. I mean, just so sound. They tackled well, probably their best tackling game all season, if we're being honest. And it was all just extremely impressive. And against a good offense, even if they had injuries on offense, the Bills have injuries on defense. You know, this is how the game works.
Yeah. And that, like, going back to the Geno Smith, like, at the goal line thing. So people always talk, and they do it to Jalen Hurts, and they sure as hell do it to Josh Allen as well. Like, the first in the at the 1 yard line when they score a touchdown, they're like, well, anybody could do that. Like, you're stealing touchdowns. That's not fair. Like, everybody in the NFL can do that. And it's like, well, they can't. It's a unique skill set that Jalen possesses. It's a unique skill set that Josh possesses, where if you have 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 or anything in 1, you're going to get a first down and or a touchdown 95% of the time when you have a player like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. The Seahawks had the ball on the 1 yard line on 3rd and goal and 4th and goal. Geno could have done the QB sneak on either of those. The Seahawks chose not to because he can't do it in the same way that those guys can do it. So essentially, you see what happens, and they end up having to settle, or they get no points on that drive in particular. And in fact, I've seen a lot of people tweet out things like, well, if your quarterback can't sneak on, first or 1 yard to go for a first down or a touchdown, well, then you don't have a quarterback. The funny thing with that is there's a quarterback in the NFL who literally cannot sneak because of an injury, and no one talks about this part of his game, and that's Patrick Mahomes. He had that knee injury earlier in his career. He doesn't QB sneak anymore. They never sneak because they can't do it with him. Again, a unique skill set that players like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts have that benefits their offense, a unique skill set that Geno doesn't possess, and thus they don't score on a critical 4th and goal there. Like, that could have changed the game, and lo and behold, it didn't, and the Bills get away with Josh Allen's first pick of the season.
And it's so funny how people just sort of assume that a quarterback sneak is anything every quarterback can do it, right? And maybe every quarterback can do it, just how every person can cook, but not everyone should cook. And not everyone should be doing a quarterback sneak, because there are some guys who just are just straight up bad at it. I keep thinking, I don't remember who it is, but there was someone, maybe it's Stafford or I don't know, but there's some quarterback somewhat recently who was doing a couple of quarterback sneaks in a game, and both of them were just awful. I mean, just truly horrendous attempts at a sneak. And it's just so funny how that people just sort of assume that, oh, well, they could just because they can do a quarterback sneak, everyone can do a quarterback sneak. It's like, that's not how this works. And like, I hate at this point giving Nick Sirianni any sort of credit for anything. But last year when he was, I think it was after the Dolphins game that the Eagles had, and somebody asked him about the tush push, and he was like, oh, well, should this be outlawed? Should this be? And he just said, listen, if everyone could do it, everybody would do it.
Bingo.
And he did that. He said it in the typical Nick Sirianni, I'm so much better than you way, which he's not. But he's also right in that because it's true. I mean, and especially with the Eagles last year having Jason Kelsey and then Dickerson and Jalen Hurts, like especially Kelsey was so important to how that works. But even outside of that, teams like the Bills and Josh Allen just good at it. Like it takes a skill set, it takes a knowledge, and you saw how they ran it a couple of times. Sometimes it's right up the middle. Sometimes you just read and go off the tackle because that's where there's space. You just have to, you can't just like shove bodies in there. You know what? It might be Daniel Jones that I'm thinking of. It might be Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was so bad at it.
And RJ brings up a good point too. Like you could argue that Josh Allen, he's just big and strong. Jalen Hurts, very strong. Like that's how they're doing it.
Yeah.
Tom Brady was not strong.
Tom Brady was just smarter.
He was just smart. And so I just Googled it because I knew it was high and I was wondering if I could find a stat on it. 90.5% of the time he converted on third or fourth and 1 when he sneaked. Yeah. So he was converting at the same rate in a very different manner. Like you said, some people are good and some people are bad at it. It doesn't even particularly matter necessarily how you do it. There's all different ways you can do it. Yet there's only a handful of players currently in the NFL that have proven capable of consistently doing it.
100%. Adam Cody brings up a good point. There were some good designed runs for Josh yesterday. In fact, it seemed like the offense, we'll take a quick detour. I mean, we've already detoured into the offense already, but the offense seemed to be very keyed in on like 4 different ideas. Run the ball with James Cook, which they were very good at yesterday. 17 carries for 111 yards or something like that, right? Yep. Yeah. Oh, look at that. I'm good. Some pretty aggressive downfield passing with Keon Coleman and also the tight ends and screens to Khalil Shakir. They ran so many wide receiver screens. It's actually ridiculous. I was so surprised that they brought so many wide receiver screens in. Anthony Prohaska of Disguised Coverage in the Film Room, if you want more shows to watch during the week, brought this up during the game that this was part of their plan, I believe, against the Ravens. Was it the Ravens they brought this up against? I could be wrong.
Think so, but they didn't have Shakir in that game, so they couldn't execute because they tried it with Samuel a ton that game. I remember.
That's a very good point. But he brought that up because that's another team. Brought it up in the point that the way that the Seahawks play, because they just bring guys from everywhere. And so when you're able to get the ball out quickly in space to someone, then you kind of mitigate the effects of that part of the defense. And you either force them to change things and try to play more straight up and just execute better, which the Seahawks can't really do because they don't necessarily have the personnel to do that, especially in the secondary, or they just keep doing it and hope that you don't execute well, which the Bills executed very well. And then you also had some like 2 or 3 quarterback runs from Josh Allen, like 2 or 3 like clear QB draws, which worked really well for the most part. And all of that combined just was so impressive. It was easily the most put together and in sync that the passing game in particular looked all season. It wasn't there. And there were obviously some off script plays that they had because this is just the nature of the NFL. And especially when you have Josh Allen, but it was like, there were just plenty of plays where they hit the concept they were trying to hit. They got the look they were looking for. The throw was delivered and the catch was made, right? It just looked like a clean, smooth operation, and it hasn't really looked like that for a while. And I think that whatever it is, whether it's Joe Brady kind of adjusting things, or maybe just the defense being a bad matchup for this situation, maybe Amari Cooper really does change this much. Whatever it is, and it may just be a combination of all these things, it's working. And the fact that it's working now, the fact that they've been able to adjust to the problems, at least so far, is a very, very good sign to me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of haters will essentially be like, okay, it was against the Titans and it was against the Seahawks. And the thing that goes missed there is the Titans have a surprisingly good defense, though that didn't really happen against the Lions. And the Seahawks have some talent on the defensive side of the ball as well. And for the most part, they haven't been healthy for the past few weeks, and they got a little bit healthier in this game. Like they got Tariq Woolen back, for example. And the Bills, for the most part, to both of those teams, sliced and diced them up. And Amari Cooper, though he was a part of it, and his gravity is definitely affecting the game, like it almost seems like a complete. It's crazy that we go from that Houston and Baltimore game, which was just like, oh my God, this is the worst I've ever seen this offense.
Yeah.
And I've watched quarterbacks like Jeff Toole play, and he never went 9 of 30. Like, this is bad. Something's wrong, and I don't know what it is. And then they rattle off games against the Jets, Titans, and Seahawks where it's like, this offense looks legit. And I don't know necessarily from a schematic standpoint what has really changed, because they're still doing those screen passes. They're still leaning into the run. The one thing I'll say that it does feel like to me, in the past 2 games at least, it felt like they were dedicated to throwing the ball a little bit more and also pushing the ball downfield, much of which is owed to Keon Coleman's his ascension. Like, he has been freaking awesome the past 2 weeks, which has me all jacked up to watch him play football now.
It's so funny. Like, after the game, I kind of thought about this. On that touchdown catch that he had was, first of all, just a great catch in general, right? Just absolutely bodying Tariq Woolen and then like going up to him and being like, good rep, guy. Good job. But what's funny is they went to that goal line fade. That was the second time that they threw that in that situation on that drive. And the first one he almost had, still didn't quite get there. But then on the second one, he got it. I mean, is that not the definition of a 50-50 pass catcher, right? Like, that's literally what you brought this dude in to do, was to win in these situations. And that's what he did in college, and it's what he's doing now. And the fact that he's been able to do this so well and so consistently, I mean, I believe before the season started, when we were sort of setting expectations for Keon Coleman in particular, we were like, okay, maybe he's in that sort of 400 to 600 yard range, like maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. But no. We were higher on touchdowns because we thought he could be a red zone threat.
Yep. But low on receptions.
But low on receptions and low on relatively low on yards. Mm-hmm. Right now, he is low on receptions. He's got 21 catches through 8 games. Thank you. But almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. And what's more encouraging, at least to me, and especially you saw this yesterday, he just looks like he's part of the offense, that it's not just go up and catch it. He's running a few actual routes. It's not a super diverse route tree. I don't want to like portray him as something that he's not, right? Because he's not some super nuanced route runner, and I don't know that he'll ever be that type of guy. You also don't need him to be that type of guy. Bingo. One, because you have guys now like Amari Cooper, who's like high level route runner, Khalil Shakir, who is also that sort of shifty type of guy. You have Coleman, who just brings that different element to the offense. And that's so important, to have different ways to attack. And I know that it's sort of a thing that people talk about when constructing, especially when teams get like a bunch of tall, big receivers, like, oh, they're building a basketball team and, blah, 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 blah. How often does that actually work out? Usually not often. But to me, you should not be building a wide receiver room like a basketball team. You should be building it like a baseball pitcher, where you aren't just relying on 1 or 2 things. You're not relying on just your fastball. You need your fastball, but you also need a changeup. You need your curve. You need your slider. Like, you need to be able to hit different things in order to attack different hitters. Same thing on offense with wide receivers, and really just as offense as a whole, right? This is sort of what's made the Bills offense so good this year, is that it's not like the Bills offenses of years past, even going back to Brian Daboll, and especially with Ken Dorsey, But with Dable, it was so reliant on throwing and throwing and throwing. And as long as they could scheme up, and as long as guys like Diggs and Beasley won, and Davis, it would work. But if they didn't and they were able to clamp down, then they couldn't go to the run game because the offensive line, one, wasn't good enough. And two, they didn't have like a clear focus on what the run game was supposed to be either. With the Bills, it's like this team is so good and at inside zone, it's ridiculous. Tackle wrap is another like go-to bread and butter concept for this team. There's certain things that this team can do so well and execute at a high level that is not just like cool to see right now, it's sustainable, and more importantly, it's sustainable into the playoffs.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree with you more. Like you go back to a few years like ago when they were the Smurfs, right? That was the nickname for them because they were all little wide receivers, and now they're so like dynamic and diversified on that side of the ball, and especially like a huge credit to Keon Coleman. And also, what's really exciting about him is now opposing teams have to be wary of him. He's not just out there because the Bills need a wide receiver out there. He's out there because he can beat you in different ways. He can also knock the snot out of your DB if the DB is not paying attention. He'll drive you right into a bench if he has to, apparently. But then you bring up Amari Cooper, who can beat you with the route run, and Khalil Shakir can beat you underneath. Kincaid is going to win in a matchup with a linebacker 8 out of 10 times. They can run the ball in a shiftier manner with James Cook, though he can lower the boom. So can Ray Davis. Josh Allen can break out of the pocket. Like, they can beat you in way more ways than they've ever been able to. So now when it comes to slowing down this offense, it becomes even more difficult. And people will point to the Ravens game, people will point to the Texans game, and they'll ignore the fact that Khalil Shakir wasn't on the field. And I even though to some extent the rest of the NFL is going to say, who's Khalil Shakir? Like, I don't care if he's not on the field. It's like, that was the easy button. He's the easy button. There's no other easy button on this team besides him, though now Amari Cooper could be that easy button. So you've kind of protected yourself in the future when you go play a team like the Ravens or you go play a team like the Texans. They can slow down one thing, but if they slow down that thing, you can lean on another thing. So it's super exciting and truly, yesterday watching Keon Coleman play football, I was like, oh boy, this kid's going to be fun. And he's now on pace for over 800 yards, like 7 touchdowns. That's one hell of a rookie season. I didn't expect this even at this point in the season. I didn't expect him to be doing these things. And he hasn't been perfect. He had a drop yesterday, but he's been damn good. And he's been better than that guy in Kansas City. I'll say that too.
That's very true. RJ Melville says, I still think Diggs gave Houston's defense the playbook. It's the only thing that makes sense since it's such an outlier. First of all, Ken Dorsey's playbook, because he wasn't here for when Joe Brady actually made the changeover. It's not like he got Joe Brady's playbook. And even beyond that, I mean, the problem in that Texans game was that the Bills offense just straight up sucked because they couldn't execute, right? I mean, that was the game where Keon Coleman wasn't looking the right direction and had the pass go right off his noggin. Like, that was more the Bills losing that game than it was the Texans doing something super crazy or, predicting every single thing. Like, the Bills just couldn't execute in that game in any phase for most of that game. But it is what it is. And I don't, for the Bills' only 2 losses to beat a Baltimore and Houston, okay, like, yeah, a lot of teams are going to lose to those 2 teams, and a lot of teams have lost to those 2 teams already. So I don't want to make too much out of those 2 games in particular.
Yeah, and the Houston loss being on a 59-yard field goal like that, the Bills offense played as bad as they could have, like literally as bad as they could have, and it took a 59-yard field goal to beat Buffalo. So it's a little bit of a, I don't have my words today, man. But I guess it's a little bit of sugar on top of a really bad cake or something like that. I don't know. This Bills offense is fun right now.
Sure. It is, and it's good to see. Just Tip Canoe says, I like women who work at Staples. They have an easy button. All right, let's settle down, guy.
I can't say I've ever heard that. As David freezes with that on screen. When David does unfreeze here, I think what will one thing to give credit to, the Bills' offensive line was absolutely dominant yesterday. I know David alluded to that with the zone running, but Buffalo's offensive line just
now my internet
just beat the absolute snot. You're back. Bill's
yeah
offensive line beat the snot out of that Seahawks front, and did it over and over and over again on every different style, whether it was pass or run. That offensive line was great in that game yesterday.
Yeah, the offensive line was just moving dudes left and right. They were just displacing them the entire game, and it was from the get-go, right? And to go like that first drive, I think we forget that started at like the 10 because of a penalty on the punt return, and they just went right down the field and were able to get a touchdown from there. And that to me was just such a positive sign. One, to force a 3-and-out, and then overcome a penalty or two on that drive, because the Bills had so many freaking penalties in that game, and then actually score a touchdown, like to look good doing it. It wasn't all through like big plays. It wasn't some totally busted coverage or anything like that. It was just like good, solid offense balancing the run and the pass. It was all just so well done. It was very, very cool to see, and just so welcome after last week against the Titans started off so slowly, where they were the ones who had 3-and-outs to start the game. And you just saw the Titans kind of methodically push the ball down the field with a bunch of play action and screens and blah, blah, blah. It was just really impressive for the Bills to be able to come out and do this to a good Seahawks team and just beat them straight up like this.
Yeah, and I think it was Greg Thompson that I saw tweet this. If it wasn't him, whoever did tweet it, kudos to them. On that first drive, because of the penalties, the Bills had 110 net yards. So they literally outgained the field, which is such a cool little stat, and just shows how dominant they were. I heard I heard one of the ESPN or Fox Sports guys talking about it today and saying like, it's usually when you have those 10-yard penalties at some point in the drive, like it's just going to set you too far back and you can't overcome it. The fact that Buffalo is essentially like, yeah, keep throwing flags on us, we don't care. Like we'll just get the first down and we'll go score again. That made it all the more impressive how good that offense was yesterday.
Yeah, and I'd like to see less flags. And we can sit here and talk about how poor NFL officiating is. We already know that. But the reality is just that, the Bills were committing a lot of penalties yesterday. That's just how it is. And that needs to be cleaned up. Because if I'm remembering correctly, the Bills-Jets game on Monday night had 23 penalties that were called. And that was the most in a game to that point in the season. Until yesterday's game against the Seahawks, where there were 24 penalties called. So it's not great. It's not a good look. And penalties have been an issue for McDermott teams in the past. And it's frustrating. And it's something that is a clear and obvious issue, and it does need to be cleaned up. I don't know what exactly you do to clean up all that sort of stuff. But on that same note, right, like it was a bad Seahawks loss for them, but it went from like bad to just outright embarrassing when they were fighting each other on the sidelines and, just kind of making asses of themselves as the game went on. It wasn't great. It was and then in the post-game press conference, like Geno Smith is out here saying like, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of Bills fans in there. It kind of felt like we were not at home. And it's just like, that was a rough day.
Yeah. And in that regard,
for this team.
Yeah, in that regard, like Rich Eisen, I listened to a little clip of his about the Bills, and I think he said 50 years. I don't remember. He's like, I've been covering the NFL for 50 years. I've never heard anybody reference another team taking over Seattle Stadium, ever. And he's like, the 49ers fans travel well, and they're much closer. And the Bills fans took over that stadium. Kudos to Bills fans. Like that's pretty cool. And Honestly, you don't see Sean McDermott smile that often. When he was talking about that, he had a giant grin on his face. Josh Allen stopped an interview to talk about the fans. It truly is impressive that Bills fans were essentially like, let's fly from Buffalo to Seattle, one of the longest flights you could possibly do, and take over that stadium and get to witness a 31-10 win. It's really freaking cool.
It's so cool. And especially on it's a very classic sort of Seattle day where it was like, oh, it's nice and sunny to start, and then it just started raining. It just kept raining. It was just everything about it was a rough game for the Seahawks. It was maybe arguably their worst game of the season so far, just because they had it. They should have been way more competitive in this game than they actually were. And then to not only be non-competitive, but kind of look embarrassing along the way, just it's not great. And in a division that's still extremely up in the air, because 3 teams in the division are 4-4, and the Rams are like 3-4, right? Like that division is very much up in the air, and I don't know what direction any of those teams are going to go at this point, because the Rams were like ready to sell off everything before they beat the Vikings on Thursday Night Football, and they were like, whoa, hey, now, hold on. We might have a chance here now. Then the Cardinals, who like started off pretty slow, have now rounded a bit more into form. They've had 2 straight weeks where they've won on a walk-off field goal, which is crazy that's a thing that they've done. And then you have the Niners, who, my God, talk about sloppy.
Oh, that game was bad. It was bad.
That was a bad game. The whole Niners team, offensively and defensively, especially in the first half, was so sloppy. It was just bad. And then they came out in the second half and they were definitely better. They were, especially defensively, they were like clearly pissed off and started hitting people. But man, it was just so rough for them. And this is a team where we talked about this. The vibes are bad in San Francisco, and they were bad in the offseason. They're not great now because you're dropping like flies with Brandon Ayuk, who was a big reason why the vibes were bad coming into the season. He gets his contract, didn't do much when he was healthy, and then tore his ACL and his MCL. Like, that's just a brutal series of unfortunate events. And unfortunately, Lemony Snicket is not involved in this. It's just, I don't know. And then you've got, of course, Christian McCaffrey going to Germany to try and get like a 3rd or 4th opinion on his Achilles tendonitis or whatever it is. And it's bad vibes. Bad.
Honestly, I was just, you brought that up, and I'm trying to remember all the bad vibes teams we had, but the ones I can come up with: the Dolphins 2-5,
yep,
the Jets 2-6 were both bad vibes, the Browns 2-6, the Bengals 3-5, the Jaguars 2-6. That's just in the AFC. If I go to the NFC and I'm trying to remember bad vibes team, I think Dallas,
the Niners,
and Dallas and the Niners, who are 3-4 and 4-4.
Did we have Philly in there? I feel like we had Philly in there.
We probably had Philly in there. So they're the outlier. They're 5-2 right now.
And to be fair, I wouldn't even say that the vibes are good in Philly right now. They're less bad than they were, but they're still not like amazing. But yeah, I mean, for that to be the only outlier, listen, I'm now, it feels dumb to say, and I acknowledge that it's dumb to say, I'm totally vibes pilled when it comes to football now. We're like, I'm not going to say it's all that matters. There's obviously other things that go into this. We didn't just like pick the Niners just to be bad because they had bad vibes. We picked the Niners to not be as good because we felt like there's some issues here. And if Brandon Ayuk isn't going to go, can Deebo Samuel stay healthy? And that was before Christian McCaffrey got hurt, which obviously plays a big factor into this. Mm-hmm, but yeah, it's just the vibes have to be good. And despite the fact that the Bills offloaded a bunch of talent, the vibes were better than they've ever been. And you're sitting here at 6-2. Halfway through the season, or almost halfway through the season, because we're not allowed to have a halfway point in the season because now there's 17 games.
That still will never piss me off. It's still hard to do like the math on it all. Yeah, it's a the vibes thing, like as much as it's kind of, I feel like a joke to some extent, like it does hold some weight here. And like you can just go through the NFL and look at these teams and you're like, oh, that makes sense. They were all pissy in the offseason and now look at them. I don't know. It's fun to watch those like weird things come to fruition.
Yeah, it really is. Sweet Spike says, excited about Vaughn returning. I am also excited about Vaughn returning. I hope that will help kind of boost the pass rush a little bit. Although, in all honesty, the edges have been fine.
Mm-hmm.
The interiors where the problem has been in terms of pass rush productivity. Adam Pencil, who does a lot of our stats and information and analytics for us here at Cover One, has kind of been on this and wanting to trade for specifically Sebastian Joseph Day. And I'd be fine with that. I don't know how much that'll cost, but whatever. I'm all for making moves to make your team better in general. So
I don't think anyone in the history of Twitter has tweeted the phrase Sebastian Joseph Day more than Adam at this point. I see like at least 5 tweets a day from him. Like, we need to trade for him now, and if we do, then the Super Bowl will be on the horizon. And it's like, all right, that'd be a nice trade, but yeah, I don't know. It's
he just wants the Sebastian Joseph Day vibes,
Yeah.
Maybe he brings good vibes. I don't know. We'll have to look into that some more. Timothy Catch says, go Bills, as always. Ariola Grande says, petition to change Khalil Shakir's name to Shakir. Okay, we're gonna have to workshop that a little bit. So a friend of our family, we go to this Bills bar like 10 minutes from our house, and there's a friend of ours that sometimes joins us. And last year she was like, oh, I love this Shakir guy because I always get to do Shakira. I'm like, God, that's so stupid. And now every time he makes a catch, I'm just like, Shakira. And I can't help myself doing it. I'm just like, I kind of like it. Whatever. He's good. He's a good player, man. There's no other way of putting that. Timothy Catch also says 70 watching and 28 likes. Drop the elbow on the like. First of all, I'm stealing this. I'm absolutely going to be using this from now on. Drop the elbow on the like. I don't know how you do that. Like, I understand that's a wrestling reference, but like physically, I don't know if you could just use the thumb. But also, I am going to be saying drop the elbow on the like. That's great. Ralph Wilson Sr. from the grave says, and yet the bad vibes of the Bills getting rid of a bunch of captains along with Diggs, the biggest dead cap, and still kicking ass. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Is you look at some of these teams, and the Broncos are another example of this, where they said we would rather pay Russell Wilson the biggest dead cap in NFL history to not play for this team than have him be our quarterback. And right now they're 5-3, and they're not like a good team, but they're fine, right? And it's largely based on defense. And when Bo Nix isn't sucking, he's not terrible. At the very least, he's been a boon for a couple of my fantasy teams, and I am unfortunately far too invested in multiple dynasty leagues with Bo Nix, and it's not fun. But this is the grave that I've dug myself. But like, they're fine with that. And then with the Bills and having Stephon Diggs be on another team and incurring all the dead cap that came with that, they've been fine too. And you kind of wonder, like, I wonder if the Browns are looking at this and thinking, maybe we do just cut the cord. And in fairness, that despite Russell Wilson's dead cap being so astronomical, the Browns' dead cap, if they got rid of Deshaun Watson, would be even worse. Like, to a point where it's almost impossible to fully fathom it.
Yeah, so I always have a trouble reading these things, but a post 6-1 release, they can't do it. They can't. If they do a post 6-1 release this is 2024, sorry. Let's see, 2025. Yeah, if they do a post 6-1 release, they take an extra $46 million in cap hit next offseason. Yeah. So his cap hit becomes what? 82 million, 92 million?
Something and like then
and then he has another 54 million cap hit in 2026. Like,
it's bad, man. It's just bad. I don't know how else to put it.
I don't know if they can literally. I don't think they can do it next year. I think they're gonna have to wait one more year.
Yeah. But you know, with Russell Wilson, it's $53 million. The Broncos have $81 million in dead cap for this year. And they might be a wild card team. Like, and I get on Sean Payton because I think he is overrated as a coach in some circles. And I think he uses the media to kind of paint a better picture of him than what actually exists in reality. But he does have that team playing relatively well, given all the sort of handicaps that they've given themselves. And especially defensively, like combining Vance Joseph with Jim Leonard, who's their like passing game coordinator on defense, is a really great combination that is really working out for them right now.
Yeah, they're about to play the Ravens and the Chiefs back-to-back weeks, so we're going to learn a lot about that Broncos team here real quick.
I feel like the Ravens will kind of bowl through them. The
Chiefs could be a fun game.
The Chiefs could be a fun game because they won against the Chiefs last year, if I remember correctly. And yeah, they won one game against the Chiefs last year, but that could be an interesting game. And you know for a fact, like kind of what this, maybe not to the same degree because it won't be quite as many eyes on it. But if Bo Nix beats the Kansas City Chiefs, that'll be like kind to his sort of aura and status as a draft pick will be what Jane Daniels did yesterday on that Hail Mary, I think. Just sort of making people think like, this is it. We've got the guy. And whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But it's possible. I think that's something that could happen. I could see that. RJ says Sebastian Joseph Day sounds like a mid-2000s folk rock singer. I don't think I've ever heard a more accurate take on this show. Like that's actually so on point. I kind of love that. I might steal that too. Yeah.
I did just want to, and I know we bounced all over the place today, but I just looked up the dead caps by team. And it's interesting if you look at the top 7, you got the Broncos, the Bills, the Vikings, all very much in playoff spots. The Titans, will ignore them. Then you have the Eagles, the Buccaneers, and the Chargers. So 6 of the 7 teams that are in the highest dead cap are all in line for a playoff spot right now.
Yeah. And this might be a slightly overrated narrative that we have to address moving forward. Maybe you just like. I think everybody sort of accepts that the sunk cost fallacy really is a fallacy, right? And that NFL teams and ownerships and maybe front offices are not quite as willing to buy into that, or even coaches, right? Because some of that idea comes from the fact that you're paying players who are not good, and maybe some coaches are like, yeah, but if you just give me another year, we can make this work, or blah blah blah. And it might go the other way, where a front office is like, hey, you need to make this work because we paid this dude a bunch of money, and I'm not cutting him, and blah 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 blah. To address what's being talked about in this chat, so this right here is just another pillow that I use for my back because I'm old and I don't like it either, but it helps support my back when I'm asleep and it makes me feel better. I wish that were a body because that would be way more interesting, but that's not how this goes, unfortunately. It doesn't go. It looks like it goes the full width of the bed. It doesn't. Like you can kind of see, like it goes here and then it just sort of levels off there. It's not great because it's all just sort of white, but whatever. So am I. Moving on to something that's actually worth talking about. We've been so all over the place. This is the funny part. You did show notes and they're very good and they're very organized, and we just have not been that at all in this show.
I think like a little defense talk probably.
Yeah. Let's talk about defense. So, 32 rushing yards for the Seahawks. That's just if you had told me that the Seahawks had 32 rushing yards yesterday, and like going into this game, I would have been like, yeah, like in that first drive that they like, that was the biggest concern for me, was just the Seahawks being able to run all over the Bills with Walker and Charbonnet, and it just never ever happened. And part of that is just because the Seahawks came out and threw the ball so much. And this was something coming into the game that you talked about, which was that Geno Smith has like 90 more passing attempts than everyone else in the NFL.
Yeah.
Which is, I like Geno. I like Geno quite a bit. That should not be the case. And part of that, I think, is just because they're playing from behind sometimes. But like, you've got a really good running back duo in Walker and Charbonnet. You need to lean on that a lot more than they're currently doing.
Yeah, that's what I thought was going to happen this game. I literally thought that they were just going to keep running the ball over and over and over again, and then they were going to hit Jackson Smith and Tyler Lockett over the middle, and we were just going to struggle because our linebackers, like, I don't trust Dorian Williams and or Balin Spector in coverage, and that's where you can attack the Bills and you can beat them because other teams have done that and beat them that way. Right. And yet the Seahawks essentially said, no, we're not going to do that, which I don't get. Like, it didn't make sense that the Seahawks didn't take that strategy. And yeah, the Bills were winning at the line of scrimmage when the Seahawks were running, but I just don't think they ran enough. At some point, they were going to break one, and they just essentially were like, we're not going to keep running it. You can't make. They were the antithesis almost of the Bills Cowboys game last year, where the Bills were like, oh, we can just keep running it and we'll keep getting yards on the Cowboys. The Seahawks were just like, we're just not even going to try. Like, we don't want to. And the fact that they had 32 rushing yards, of which Geno had 16, like, an impressive outing by the Bills, but a stupid outing by the Seahawks. It was just a bad game plan on their end, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just so weird just how insistent they were on throwing the ball, and that it was clearly just part of the game plan because they came out throwing the ball 3 straight times. Like, it just didn't make any sense. On that first drive, though, 2 of those throws were incompletions because of Gregory Rouso, who got his big giant arms up in the way and deflected a couple of passes. He also had 2 tackles for loss and a quarterback hit. Dude's just good. I mean, this is so far his best season in the NFL, and it's really exciting to see. And I truly think that if the interior of the defensive line were playing better and more consistently, he would have at least a couple more sacks so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at the 3.5 sacks and have this idea in their head that he's not having a good year, which just is wrong. Like, there's been games too. I can't even recall the exact game, but I was like, I need more from him. Like, I need more from him because he's too good to not be doing anything right now. But at least in yesterday's game, he was dominant, and he should have been dominant because he was up against a 4th string right tackle that he just absolutely abused all game. But to that end, he has the 3.5 sacks, which is fine through 8 games, like on pace for 7-8 sacks. I think he actually gets to 10 this season. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get to 10, but he's also making tackles in the backfield. He's defending passes. He's doing and he's constantly pressuring quarterbacks. Like, I think he has one of the highest pressure rates in the NFL among edge rushers. He is right now the Bills' best defensive lineman, I think by a fairly large margin, to a point where, like, without him, I don't know how confident I'd be in the Bills' ability to, 1, get to the quarterback, and 2, even stop the run. He is right now the guy up there. Like, he's the dude, and they need somebody else to be the dude too, and do it quickly.
Yeah, it was all. It's a good game from him, but the rest of the defensive line does need to kind of continue to be consistent and kind of match what he's doing, at least to some degree. Dorian Williams, 2 tackles. I don't really know what to do with that. I'm not 100% sure what that means, what I should take away from that.
So I put that on the list just because that was a stat that really stood out to me in this game, because other than that, Dorian Williams has been a tackle machine for the Bills, and yesterday he had 2, which I think is like not that big a deal because the Bills were winning in so many different ways. The
Mhm.
one thing that concerns me always with Dorian Williams, there's a couple times every game where he just looks like he's gone, like he doesn't know where he is, and the offense can abuse him in that regard. It helps to have Terrell Bernard next to him because Terrell Bernard can put him in the right spots and protect him from making mistakes. But until we get Bernard back, there is a little bit of concern with Dorian. But as far as tackling goes, like I think this was more an anomaly than anything, but something weird to call out. That I also tweeted this. He had the same number of solo tackles that Josh Allen had yesterday, which is very interesting.
That's fair. Let's see. Ed Oliver definitely looked better in this game, which going against this particular Seahawks offensive line, which is banged up and also not very good. That's what you would want.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still encouraging that he was able to do that. You kind of wonder, he has not had a great start to the season. Again, kind of playing into the issues that they've had on the interior of the defensive line. We know he had the hamstring issue that kept him out of the game last week, right? He was out against the Titans.
No, out against the Ravens. He played the Titans. Yeah,
out against the Ravens. Sure. I don't know why I'm doubting you. I trust you on that. But yeah, you kind of wonder how much of that is still affecting him, how much of that maybe even before that Ravens game was an issue and it just didn't come up as like a major thing to put him on the injury list and blah, blah, blah. That's all very speculative, obviously, but it might explain something. And maybe as the season goes along, we'll be able to see a little bit more from Ed Oliver and more out of that interior defensive line as a whole, or at least that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, we know the talent's there. Like we literally have seen it, and we've seen him take over games. Like I just need to see that again. Like we haven't really seen him have that game this season, but I guess there's some like benefit to that, right? Like I don't think he's going to play worse as the season goes on. If anything, I think we might unlock the real Ed Oliver at some point, and then suddenly this defense, which has played pretty damn well considering the injuries it's had, you now get a legit Ed Oliver, and you get Greg Rouso continuing to ascend. Maybe you get Milano back, you get Bernard, but like there's some hope that the Bills defense is only going to get better, not worse.
Right. So that's fair. I think that's totally fair. Big man interceptions are one of my favorite things in the world. Yeah. And for Austin Johnson to get his first career interception on that was very, very cool and very, very fun.
Anybody over 300 pounds, if you get an interception, should automatically be Defensive Player of the Week. If you're over 300 pounds and you get a pick, Defensive Player of the Week. There's not a debate. I don't care if somebody under 300 pounds has 7 sacks. If you got a pick, it's yours. You get the award.
It was just such a cool moment, and especially when the Seahawks were driving, because they were around midfield when that happened. And honestly, even if they didn't, like the screen was still kind of sniffed out anyway, which is kind of what disrupted the timing of it and allowed them to get in position there. KC2 Hill just kind of grazed the ball as it went through his hands, and then Austin Johnson just finished it off. It was a good play. It was a fun play. Before that, though, Rasul Douglas almost had a great pick six that would have just been fantastic. I would have loved every second of that if it had happened, but unfortunately, it did not.
Yeah, it seems like that's been a lot of he's playing very well this year too. Yes. Like I don't want to take anything away from him, but it seems like so much of his year he's been a millisecond, not a step behind, but like a millisecond behind a massive play. And that was just another example where he almost stepped in front for pick six that would have ended the game right then and there. Yes. The Bills still get the win, but Rasul Douglas has been freaking awesome this year. Really excited that he's still a Bill.
Mm-hmm. Areola Grande says, you guys are Yankees fans, right? Pretty much a must win tonight. For I am a Phillies fan, and as such, I have intense hatred for any New York-based sports franchise. And you are not someone who would identify as a Yankees fan, but you are sort of a Yankees fan.
I would not currently identify as a Yankees fan until they fire that bozo Boone. And I, as much as it pains, because I do not like the Dodgers for many reasons, I hope the Yankees get swept. I hope they get swept, especially because of how Game 1 played out, where Boone's an idiot. That if they get swept, oh, it would be glorious. Because I like being right more than I like the Yankees winning World Series. And so, as long as they don't win a World Series, I will be happy because I was right. I said something that made David so happy, I froze him in a smile. You back, David?
Yeah. Anyway, we're gonna wrap this up because Monday Night Football and the World Series are starting right now. Tyler Bass made his kicks. Good on you. Love it. Love seeing that. Keep doing it. Sam Martin, someone that we were not looking forward to playing football this year, and we're kind of actively rooting for someone else to take that job. Punting pretty well so far. Not amazing, but like pretty well.
Yeah, the Bills punt less than most teams in the NFL, and when they call upon Sam Martin, he's punting well enough where I don't think I've said more than once this season, like, ugh, what was that? So as long as I don't say that more than once, I consider it a good season for a punter.
That's fair. That's very fair. I think that's a good like way to measure that particular position. It's just like how much disgust do you have, or how many times have you been disgusted watching that? Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. All right, let's talk about the Dolphins briefly. Man, they looked way better this past week against Arizona. Arizona's defense is not very good, so you would hope that would be the case with your quarterback coming back. They still lost the game, and some of that is just the defense completely surrendering at the end of that game. But then you kind of wonder, like, okay, so what does this team have? They have maybe an offense that can get 20-something points, maybe, and a defense that right now, especially if Zach Seiler is going to be out, which, I mean, an orbital bone fracture, you're going to be out. Sorry. And that sounds utterly painful. And I have no idea how you even do that, but that is brutal. And assuming the Bills win this game, and assuming the Bills don't beat themselves in order to lose this game, they will be 4.5 games above everyone else, potentially 5.5.
Yeah, man.
But this team's not going to win the division, so
it's a game where if the Bills should run away with this game. 1, you've had the Dolphins number forever. 2, you are the significantly better team. And then 3, the Dolphins are as banged up, if not more banged up than the Bills. They're missing a bunch of key players, whether you're talking about Zach Seiler or Jalen Phillips. Javon Holland, I don't think is going to play. So on the defensive side of the ball, you're like, they don't have those stars. I mean, I guess you still have Jordan Brooks, who's a nice player. You still have Jalen Ramsey. But there's definitely issues on that side of the ball where the Bills can put up 40 points. Like, it wouldn't stun me if they put up 40 points. It all comes down to the offense. And until Tua can consistently play well against the Bills, I have no reason to expect him to play well against the Bills.
Yeah.
So in this, like, the Dolphins know not take the division out of it. The Dolphins know if they lose this game, their season's over. Like, they're not going to be able to get out of this hole and go make the playoffs. So They're going to throw every single thing they have at the Bills. And that might just play right into the Bills, like, right into the Bills' game plan. The Bills might be able to sit back and say, we know you're going to be goofy. We know you're going to try some weird stuff because you have to find a way to win this. We're just going to bide our time until you make a dumb mistake, and we'll just tear this game apart. Man, I think the Bills win by 2 scores. It just seems like one of those games. Yeah,
I think I don't like predicting that any team is going to win by multiple scores. I'd be a little surprised if the Bills did not win this game by at least 10 points, I think. Dolphins seem very miserable on both sides of the ball. Maybe they'll get some good plays here and there. I expect them to at some point, but they don't have it this year, man. And I don't think they ever will get it this year. And it's going to be pretty rough for them. Yeah. That's going to be it. that's going to be it for us. Except for this one comment from RJ Melville. Don't understand the rep concert after the anthem and immediately before the first pitch, especially when I swear he said Reggie Johnson instead of Jackson. So part of me, so they're definitely leaning into this idea of like the West Coast, East Coast rap battle scene, right? Like that's what that's about.
That's be my guess, yeah.
That has to be the, because they did that in LA too with Ice Cube, and first of all, that was so long, like that was almost unbearably long. I'm glad that I had that muted throughout the entire time, but baseball's trying. I give baseball credit for trying to like do different things and try and gain more viewership. It's kind of why I was okay with a Dodgers Yankees World Series, just because you have two very strong brands and plenty of stars and recognizable names and all that. Maybe you'll get people interested in baseball, especially when that first game went as cool as it did and ended as coolly as it did. But yeah, I'm just hopeful. I'm only hoping for baseball to do well now because now I'm into baseball, which I didn't expect to happen at this point in my life. But now I want baseball to succeed, and I'm not hopeful that it will either, but that's a different discussion. We'll save that for the baseball pod, which will never exist. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We are very grateful for all of you coming out and sticking through my technical interruptions and issues that I cannot promise will be resolved next week, unfortunately, because I am at the mercy of Xfinity, which, I've said enough bad things about them tonight. If you enjoyed this show, please drop the elbow on the like button on your way out. It is a great way to boost things for the algorithm so that more people can view us and support us. And if you also want to help view more shows throughout this week, go to the rest of this week. You've got shows Disguised Coverage. You've got Under Review with Joe DeRosa. You've got Film Room. You've got the Cover One flagship show. Like all sorts of great shows throughout the week. Hit subscribe. Share this with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. Subscribe on Spotify or iTunes. Always the best way. Just leave a review somewhere. There's all sorts of different ways to support us. In addition to all of that, I'm guessing you did not mention it. Okay, so we'll do this real quick on the way out. If you are someone who enjoys things like free swag and extra content and a Discord channel to talk to people to, like Cover One Pass, $60 a year. Go to cover1.net, sign up today. It's the best $60 on football you'll spend all season. It is the best content, the best people, the best creators. I mean, all Buffalo Bills related, and all other stuff. You got music, you got food, you got politics if you really hate yourself that much, and all sorts of other great stuff to talk about. If there's something you want to talk about, you can talk about it with somebody on Cover One Pass in our Discord. You get all sorts of exclusive content and access. It's just totally worth it. Plus a free Cover One 21-26 shirts collaboration, which is always great. And they're a great group to collaborate with, and we're happy to do so. Sign up today at cover1.net. Best $60 on football you'll spend all year. Thank you all for joining us. I promise, Spin and RJ, rubbish how David keeps forgetting the greatest segment of all segments. I understand that. I promise. I will not promise that my internet will be better, but I will promise that next week we will do True or Rubbish, and you can hold me to that. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.